Good morning, listeners. You're welcome to this week's Ag Report. I'm Jim Finn. My guests this morning are Ronan O'Connor, Aidan Brennan and Declan Keeley, and we will be discussing the following subjects: solar energy for farmers. We'll be discussing the Farmers Journal Dairy Day, which is coming up on Saturday week, and then we will be discussing hazardous waste and the disposal of same. My first guest this morning is Padraig Fogarty from Teagasc, and we're going to be discussing lime on the farm. Good morning, Padraig, and thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Okay, right. Why should farmers consider liming their lands, Padraig?
Yeah, sure. I suppose there's a good few advantages of liming the land, Jim, but I suppose first and foremost, I suppose you're going to grow more grass if the pH of the soil, I suppose, is at optimum levels, around 6.5. I suppose if your pH is well below 6, trials have shown if you can get it up to their optimum level, you're going to grow about a ton to a ton and a half of more grass, dry matter per hectare per year on average. I suppose other advantages of getting the lime right, I suppose the pH has a big influence on the availability of plant nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. And I suppose if the soils are acidic, these nutrients become locked up or less available. So even if you're applying fertilizer or manure, you're not going to get the full bang for your buck in terms of getting the most out of them. I suppose an example, like if you put out a bag of 18612 next spring on soils that are below optimum levels, well below 6, like out of the 18 units to nitrogen there, like you're probably going to lose 3 or 4 units to the sky. And then for the phosphorus, if the pH isn't right, about half that 6 units will be locked up in the soil. And I suppose out of the 12 units of K, you're probably talking 3 or 4 units of that locked up. So I suppose the trials are showing that if you apply lime, you will release that P and K that's locked up. So like if you can apply lime and bring up the pH and optimum levels, it's shown that you can bring up phosphorus a full index by just applying lime and not actually adding any phosphorus to the soil, because it's invariably locked up if it's been spread all along and the pH is off. I suppose another advantage of the lime is it helps keep out weed and weed grasses out of the sward, and it promotes the longevity of perennial ryegrass swards and clover. Like if you're trying to establish clover, it just won't last if the pH is low. It needs that pH to be right. I suppose another advantage of lime then, a lot of people don't realise that the soil releases a lot of nitrogen from this, I suppose, every year as the temperature warms up from May onwards through a process called mineralisation. Basically, it's organic matter being broken down by the soil microbes. And that can range, depending on the soil type, it could range from 70 to 130 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year. But if the pH is very low, you just won't get that free nitrogen. The microbes and earthworms just don't like acidic conditions. So I suppose in an era where fertilizer allowances are getting tighter in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus, and with the cost of nitrogen and phosphorus now especially, I suppose it's a no-brainer to get the pH to land right, so you're getting as much of that nitrogen and phosphorus to work for you when you are buying it and putting it out. I suppose all those advantages, I suppose Teagasc estimates that for every euro you spend on lime, you're going to get €7 back. So in terms of return on investment on the farm, it's probably one of the best things you can do, you know.
Right. Can I ask you something with regard, is there much deficiency, or are we very deficient in lime here in Tipperary, given that an awful lot of our land is on a limestone base?
Yeah, it's variable. Like some farmers that have limestone underneath their soil, they don't have to spread that much lime. But then other parts, that wouldn't be limestone, like they would have to apply a nice bit of lime. You know, it depends on your soil sample results really. But there are pockets, all right, that would not have to spread as much lime, we'll say, as other parts of the country. The derogation probably helped too. Like, I suppose there's a lot of regulations came in, but I suppose that was one that was very positive in terms of it kind of focused the mind on farmers to get the lime right, because it became compulsory if you were in the derogation scheme.
Mm-hmm. And am I right then in saying that a farmer should try to, I suppose, spread lime every 6 years or thereabouts on pieces of his land?
Yeah, like there's a guideline there that on average, when you take the rainfall, the offtakes in terms of beef or milk and silage offtakes, the guideline there is about 2 ton per acre, we'll say every 5 years. But that's very variable. Like if you go to the west of Ireland, they get an awful lot more rain, and you could be talking maybe 2 ton to the acre every 3 years. And then, as you say, Jim, like there are some parcels of land that are on limestone, and they might need that 2 ton per acre every 5 years. So I suppose it's a guideline, but really the only way to know it's kind of a shot in the dark unless you do the soil samples, and then you know for definite what and how much lime your land needs.
Right. Talking about then, how much is needed. How much lime needs to be spread on farms on average?
Yeah, sure. I suppose again it's going back to the soil sample results. Like, the guidelines are there, but like I'd be saying, take the soil sample results, and then you know how much you need to spread. And then I suppose the other side of it is like you don't want to drive the pH up too high. So, for example, if you are in an area that was limestone underneath the land, like putting out lime and driving the pH up well above 7 on all your land, that could potentially lock up trace elements like magnesium, boron, copper. It could even lock up phosphorus and potassium if you go very high. So you don't want to, I suppose, drive the pH too high either. But in general, I suppose lime is needed. But look, again, it's just about going back, taking the soil samples, and I suppose applying it as per what the soil samples recommend.
Right. So we're really looking at trying to get the pH up to 6.5. That's the magical figure.
Yeah, on mineral soils. I suppose peat soils then, there will be pockets of peat soils across the county, and they will be ranging, I suppose the target will be about 5.5 to 5.8. Them soils act a bit differently, and the phosphorus and potassium are more available at that pH. And generally farmers that are farming those lands are aware of it. But in general, I suppose on mineral soils, Jim, you're talking about 6.5.
Rightio. Padraig, what's the best time to spread lime?
Look, I suppose November and December are very popular times to get it out, because a lot of the grazing platforms are closed off or almost fully closed off now, and you can get a big area of it done without having to worry if it's washed in before the next graze. And also, I suppose, ideally you don't want to be spreading slurry too close to spreading lime, because you can lose a bit of nitrogen from the slurry. But so now is a popular time to get covered. But I suppose, to be honest, I suppose it's weather dependent. So I suppose it's not a great tactic leaving it all until now. Generally, I don't think anyway, because look, it's grand if the weather plays ball. Like last year, 2024, we got a very dry back end. Ground conditions were very good. But if you go back to 2023, it was just not possible on a lot of farms. And even this October, November has been fairly wet to date as well. Like, so look, okay, if you're on very dry, sandy soils, generally those type of farms are fine after a few days of dry weather to spread the lime. But I suppose for farmers on not such dry land, more clay soil or heavy type land, or on higher ground, it's difficult to travel. Oftentimes I see is on these types of land, if the job is left until the end of the year, poor weather conditions can come, ground conditions deteriorate, and the job can be kicked down the line, I suppose, until the following year. So I think, I suppose, silage ground is easy enough. Like after that second cut or third cut silage, it's an ideal time to get a large area of the ground covered. But on the grazing platforms, you probably have to be a bit more opportunistic as the year goes on. So after surplus bales is a good time. After reseeding, a dry spring like 2024, or I suppose from September onwards when the rotations are getting that bit longer, is times where you can pick a few paddocks to spread. Or I suppose, again, now is ideal this time of the year if the land is travelable.
Right, and as you said, we were after getting quite a bit of rain in recent days, and that wouldn't be a good time to go out. But if we got a dry week in the next week or so, it would be a good time to do it. We'll leave it for that for this morning, Padraig. Thanks very much for joining us. That, listeners, was Padraig Fogarty from Teagasc, discussing lime and giving us some very good advice as to when and why we should be spreading lime on our land. Listeners, my next guest this morning is Ronan O'Connor, and Ronan is an agri-solar consultant with Pro Solar. Good morning, Ronan, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Jim, and thank you for having me on, and good morning to your listeners.
You are with Pro Solar as an agri-solar consultant. Can you tell me a little bit about Pro Solar, Ronan?
I suppose Pro Solar, like many solar companies in the field, deals in commercial and agri-solar within the Munster and Leinster region. Pro Solar is a sister company of RVR Technologies. RVR Technologies is a family-run business, in business with 45 years in the Munster region. RVR actually would have originated retail heat pumps and air handling units, and they're well renowned. But Pro Solar was originated about 5 years ago now. Family-run business. We working very heavily on the agri and commercial front.
You're really now talking to farmers and business people. That's the market that you sell into.
Yeah, correct. So I suppose I sell a lot of agri-solar, being from a farm myself. I'm living here in Tipperary, so Tipperary would be a strong point for myself, and Clare and Cork and the whole surrounding area, I suppose, southeast and Munster. But basically, being from a farm, I suppose I understand farmers' needs, and I understand what farmers need when it comes to agri-solar, and I suppose the TAMS grant and etc. But look, we do a lot of commercial work too. We do a lot of hotels, factories, shops, you name it. Commercial is our game when it comes to solar.
You mentioned TAMS. TAMS is a grant for farmers. So why did you mention TAMS?
Well, I suppose, look, TAMS has serious grant funding currently at this point in time. We have a 60% TAMS grant at the moment, and farmers can avail of that, which is quite incentivising.
If a farmer now listening to us this morning contact you...
Well, I suppose, look, Jim, if they were to contact us, the first thing they do is they email info@prosolar.ie or contact myself. Their inquiry will come in. They will come to myself, and I would phone the farmer and go out and assess the farm and see what his needs are. Look at his annual usage over the past 12 months. Okay, that's one of the key factors here. So whether it's a beef, dairy, tillage, or livestock farm in any way, basically anybody with a herd number that's farming more than 5 hectares of land is actually able to avail of this grant. And 60% is the figure for young, middle-aged, old, female, male. Everybody's entitled to this 60% grant. Some other grants maybe 40, but this one is 60 on it for everybody, you know.
Right, so that's quite considerable. There's a deadline on Thames at the moment. The current one is opened, but isn't it closing sometime in December?
So essentially, yeah, the Thames Grant is closing on the 5th of December next.
Mm-hmm.
So Friday the 5th of December. So all applicants that would apply within this current tranche would be reviewed after the 6th of December by the Department of Agriculture. If they're approved, which nearly all applicants get approved, then you can move forward to the next stage of installation of the solar. Now, we would have to put in an application to the department based on your usage and the amount of panels we feel are appropriate for you. And basically, at that point, we can install them at that point after. Now, just to talk a bit about, I suppose, the importance of the right system. So basically, like if you burnt 15,000 units of power over the past 12 months, just for argument's sake, you can put in a 15 kilowatt solar system and 7.5 kilowatts of battery and get 60% of a Thames grant on that. Now, there's a few things we need to look out for. You can put it on a shed of your choice in your yard, preferably near a power source, a heavy power source like a milking parlour. If the shed has internal agitating points, you can't use that shed. But if there's no agitating points in it, brilliant, you can use it. We must avoid all skylights, a few other nitty-gritties that we talk about, but this is all a part of the assessment, when you meet the farmer.
You go to a farmer. One of the questions a farmer would ask you, Ronan, and I'd be asking you as well, what's the typical payback period if I put the required number of panels and do everything to the spec that you said to us there, and what would the payback time be?
Well, sure, after the grant, it lowers the payment figure greatly. So from any of the systems I've priced over the past 2 years, you could say, generally speaking, it's anything from 1.9 years to 2.5 years, all depending on the volume of panels. But generally, about 2 years you could average it at.
That makes it very attractive, doesn't it?
Yes, totally. I often say to people, 90% of people will save at least 75% of their bill. So they only have a bill of a quarter compared to what they had now. I had a dairy farmer the other day who had a bill of €1,600 for a two-month period, and he reduced it back to €500,
Yeah, that's quite a saving. Okay, looking at solar then itself and the future of it, what's the role of solar from a farmer's point of view into the future?
Well, I suppose, look, number one is the savings, Jim, at the moment. Like, we can see that the savings are quite significant, and that's really the main driver at the moment. The grant is very attractable because it's at 60%. But I suppose for sustainability targets in agriculture going forward, it has to be looked at as a merit here, we're always getting the stick from Europe to state that, between water course and nitrates and irrigation and everything, farmers need to do their part. I believe putting in solar panels is really playing its part, We all know, it looks good on a farm shed. It looks that the farm, it looks that the farmer is doing his bit for the environment, but, alongside the savings.
Mm-hmm. Tell me this, Ronan, is there much maintenance from the farmer's point of view with regard to solar panels? 90%
of people will tell you there's no maintenance in regards to solar panels, and they're correct and right in saying that, because obviously the battery, the inverter, the solar panels, there is no moving parts in these products. The only maintenance that we always advise people is, if they're in a green area where the roof kind of gets dirty from time to time, we would advise to brush them with water. Water only, no detergent, nothing, just water. That is to keep the efficiency right on the panel and to make sure it keeps producing, the highest level power possible. To follow on with that, I would be saying you potentially may need to brush the panels maybe once every year and a half. That's generally the case.
Okay, and brushed only with water. So
only with water. It's very important that your listeners know that, actually, because sometimes detergent doesn't react too good to them,
Right. Would you be using a power hose, or would you just use an ordinary hose?
An ordinary bucket with a brush.
Right, okay.
Like you'd use to wash a car, actually, is the best way of putting it.
Have you any open days coming up or any events that you're going to attend across the Munster area in the near or distant future?
So, Jim, as you probably have seen on our social media platforms, we hold open days to educate farmers and I suppose business people and anyone really that wants to learn more about solar and their benefits. And we held one on a farm in South Tipperary very recently, and there was a great attendance at it. But look, I don't think that there's not actually anyone at the current moment in time. I think there's one actually planned below in West Cork actually in the near future, but the date has to be confirmed. We generally hold them one every 2 to 3 months. But currently, the West Cork is our next one, and that date has to be confirmed. But I'm sure our listeners here aren't going to attend it down there. But the next one will be in Kilkenny, as far as I'm aware, and that will be early next year. But basically, these open days are great because farmers can go to the event. They can hear about the solid facts about the solar panels and the install that we performed on that potential farm. And they can see the benefits of, I suppose, the batteries on especially the dairy farm side of things. We wrote an article lately on a media platform, an online media platform, of the importance of batteries and the importance, especially around the dairy farm milking, the milking platform, where early morning, late evening scenario of power usage, that it's so important to have the correct number of batteries that the panels will charge from, let's say, 10 o'clock to 4:30 in the day between milkings.
Mm-hmm.
That is crucial that we can that you have enough battery capacity to be able to save buying it off of the grid. Like there's a scenario lately there where I was dealing with one of our farmers, and I had two scenarios. But basically, he saved 80%. He generated 80% of the power he needed for that 2-month period.
Right.
And the solar panels basically did that. So the solar panels did 80% of the power for the farm for that 2-month period. And it would only have been able to be done by putting in the correct battery capacity. He would have done about 50% of the power for the farm if he didn't have the correct battery.
Somebody wants to make contact with you. What did they do?
Well, they can email ourselves at info@prosolar.ie. They can call myself on 086 832 2610 or our office on 064 770 2000.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much for joining us this morning. And listeners, if you want to know a little bit more about ProSolar, Ronan has given you the contacts, and you might forget the name, and if you do forget the name, we'll be reminding you of the name here in Tipperary, as they will be sponsoring Community Dairy for the next few months. Listeners, my next guest this morning is Aidan Brennan from the Irish Farmers Journal, and Aidan is with me to talk about Dairy 2025, which is taking place in UL University on Saturday, the 15th of the month. Good morning, Aidan, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Jim.
Now, Aidan, tell me all about the Journal Dairy Day for 2025.
Yeah, so look, it's a great event, Jim. We're delighted to be moving this year to the Midwest, to, as you say, University of Limerick, the sports arena there. So it's a massive big hall, all under one roof, and we're going to have 2 stages with action-packed talks, discussions and forums taking place throughout the day. And in between that then, we're going to have about 80 trade exhibitors who are selling everything from services to products to machinery, everything you can think of to run a profitable dairy farm in the modern age. So look, I mean, it's a mix of all sorts of talks going on. We're big focus on milk price and dairy markets, so that's really topical at the moment. We've seen big reductions in milk price from the co-ops. So we want to know where milk price is going to land in 2026. So as a result of that then, we have the CEO of Ornua, the makers of Kerrygold. We also have the CEO of Kerry Dairy Ireland. But with the chairman of the 6 of the largest co-ops in the country, who are going to give their perspective on where they see the market out, the future of the co-op movement, and everything associated with that. In addition, we're looking at slurry storage. That's topical as well because the Department of Agriculture has come out with their new nitrates action programme, which says that slurry storage on dairy farms needs to increase by 21% by 2028. So we're going to have a discussion on the best ways to build that storage, how much it's going to cost, where farmers should build it, and we're having leading experts there with Bertie Troy from GrassTech and John Mulcahy, who's a well-known builder and a dairy farmer actually from Cork. So that's a quick flavour, Jim, of some of the talks that we're going to have at Dairy Day 2025.
Getting back then to the actual day itself, what time does it kick off at, Aidan?
Yeah, so the doors will open at 9 a.m. It's going to run until 5, but the main talks aren't starting until 10:30. So that'll give farmers that come early a chance to get around the trade stand and then settle down then to hear some of the talks. The two stages are running side by side, so there'll be talks on the two stages at all times throughout the day. So it's 9 to 5 at UL Sports Arena.
Right, do you have the air code for that?
I have the air code. It's... Yes, Jim, the air code for the UL Sports Arena is D94XT66. It's at University of Limerick campus, just at Castletroy in Limerick, so very accessible from the motorways, from Cork to Tipperary, and all up the west as well. So it's a really easy to access site.
Okay, now you mentioned two main topics, Aidan. There you mentioned milk price, which is on everybody's mind at the moment, and you also mentioned the new nitrates storage criteria that is going to be needed for derogation. I'm quite sure that they'll take up most of the day at this particular event on the 15th.
They'll take up a lot of the day, Jim. They are rostered in. We've a full schedule that's actually available in this week's Farmers Journal. That's going to, there's a free supplement in the paper this week, and that's going to outline each of the stages. But to be honest, Jim, there's over 12 different talks taking place. So while milk price is a key topic of discussion, it's not the only thing that's being discussed. We're also looking at how dairy farmers can be better advocates. And of course, we're looking at people. So we've bringing over speakers from New Zealand. Lisa and Simon Linsky are well-known dairy farmers from Taranaki. And they're going to talk all about how they manage people on their farm and also how they reduce the cost of production. So I suppose the cost of production is in line with the falling milk price. We want farmers to reduce costs as we head into 2026, and there's really good talks there on how to cut farm working expenses in 2026.
In general then, moving away from the actual day itself, from your perspective as a dairy editor with the journal, are you surprised with the drop in price that we've had in 2025?
Sure I am. I think everyone is, Jim. The big reductions came in August and it really came out of the blue. I think the European traders came back from their summer holidays and they decided they wanted to cut price. But there has been a massive drop in the marketplace in Europe, and that has fed through then to falling prices in the farm gate milk prices being announced by the co-ops. So it's a huge shock, really. I wasn't expecting, milk prices have been good for all of 2025, and some, reduction in price was expected, but not to the degree that we've had. And it's really affecting Europe. Prices in New Zealand, Oceania hasn't actually fallen by as much, but there is extra milk being produced in Europe. There's extra milk being produced in the US and in New Zealand, and that's having an impact in terms of the global market. But it's Europe is where most of the pain is being felt, and we're seeing other milk processors across the continent reduce the milk price by 6 and 7 cents a litre as well. So it's not just an Irish problem, but very much farmers are at the cold face of it, and they're feeling the pain, and they will continue to feel the pain, I would think, well into 2026.
Do you think that some farmers would be nervous about, particularly those who have probably heavy borrowings, because it looks like we're getting very close to the actual cost of production?
Yeah, so IFAC, the Farm Accountancy Body, came out last week and said that cost of production is 42 cents per litre on dairy farms, and we're seeing milk prices now at 42 cents a litre. So, if they fall further, you're going to get below the cost of production. So anyone that has higher costs as a result of, as you say, higher debt levels, or if there's a lot of land leased or a lot of labour charges included, they're going to feel the pain more than others. But I mean, look, the advice is you have to refocus on costs. You know, and some of those, there's nothing that can be done about it. Like, and it's a case then of riding through this period. Look, long term, Jim, I'm really confident with the future of dairy farming in Ireland, and you know, the global demand for dairying is increasing, but there's always going to be bumps in the road, and this is an example of one of them. So it's about seeing through this period, I suppose, and coming out the other end stronger in terms of better business, more sustainable finances. But it's, yeah, I think there are farmers that are going to be worried.
Right, and I know now that it will be slightly different to the big drop back in 2007, 2008, when, you know, the cost of inputs were very, very high in relation to what we were getting for milk in those days. Now, the costs of, you know, inputs have dropped quite considerably from their very high point, but they would need to drop more if farmers are to try to survive this period, because we don't know how long it is going to last.
Yeah, 100% correct, Jim. We are seeing reductions in the price of fertiliser in particular, but feed is staying pretty stable. Even though the fact that global feed prices have fallen, Irish feed prices haven't fallen by as much. And I think there's probably leeway there for some of the co-ops and merchants that are selling feed to reduce their costs further. I would expect that fertiliser prices should probably fall further in 2026 because of reduced global demand. But that says, you know, that's going to be offset against what we've discussed in the show previously, CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. That's an EU tax, effectively, that's going to be added on to fertiliser that's imported from outside of the EU. And that could add up to 60 or 70 euros per tonne of urea for next year. So there is still uncertainty in costs, you know, and a lot of the work at farm level and reducing costs is actually done by the farmer themselves and taking action in terms of, you know, feeding less, reducing the amount of tractor driving that's going on, reducing the amount of meal that's being fed, silage made, and so on and so forth. And that's difficult to do because farms have to be run and managed properly. So there are ingrained costs in dairy farms that are just very hard to get out of.
Before I let you go anyway, thanks for that update on the dairy situation as well. Now let's get back to the event in UL on the 15th. Is there still room for people to book in for the day?
There are plenty of tickets available, Jim. They're available online at www.ifj.ie/Dairy Day. Plenty of tickets available, so the more the merrier. As I say, it's on Saturday the 15th of November at UL Sports Arena, just outside Limerick City. And
is it all pre-booking, or is there booking on the day?
They can book on the day, they can turn up. We won't turn anyone away, everyone is welcome. So you can book tickets in advance or just turn up on the day, whichever suits best.
Okay, and once again, just remind, it's in UL on Saturday the 15th, and it kicks off at 9 a.m.
That's it, thanks, Jim.
Okay, well, Aidan, look, thanks very much for joining us. That, listeners, was Aidan Brennan from the Irish Farmers Journal talking about their Dairy Day, which takes place on the 15th of the month, that's Saturday the 15th, and as I said, it kicks off at 9 a.m. And if you want more details, it's in this week's Farmers Journal. Listeners, my next guest this morning is Declan Keeley, and Declan is an inspector with the Department of Agriculture. And Declan is with me because the department are going to have a collection of hazardous waste across the country in the coming weeks. And I hope to learn all about hazardous waste from Declan, and I hope you, my listeners, will also learn about hazardous waste, and particularly hazardous waste as it applies to farmers. Good morning, Declan, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Jim, and thank you for having me on this morning.
Yeah, okay, Declan. This particular collection of hazardous waste, I suppose there's a very good reason why we are collecting hazardous waste from farmers.
Yes, so I suppose, Jim, the background to this is, you know, it's progress in the area of national hazardous waste management, in that it's working in accordance with the EPA's National Hazardous Waste Plan from 2021 to 2027. And what we have planned is a joint project between ourselves, the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, and the Department of Climate and Energy and Environment, involving key stakeholders in developing farm hazardous waste. And as you point out, these waste left on farm create potential risk to human health, the environment, and biosecurity on the farm.
Right. So, what then constitutes hazardous waste?
Yes. So I suppose hazardous waste is I suppose set out in a label of a chemical or a vet med, and the waste that will be collected as part of these collections will involve waste oil, will involve pesticides, vet meds, paints. So the oxide paint, the oil paints used in farm sheds is hazardous. Oil filters and oil drums and corrosives and grease and brake foods and coolants and all these sorts of things that we use on farms. And really, there has to be a simple way or a collective way of disposing of these wastes, and hopefully this will be a start of putting that in place nationally. Right.
And so I'm looking at some of the types and you've mentioned some of them, but we'd say veterinary medicines. There's one medicine there that I see that's not on it, but I'm quite sure it's implied, and that is any tablets that a vet might have given a farmer, and some of them are left over. I'm quite sure they constitute veterinary medicines, do they?
Yeah, they're within the umbrella of veterinary medicines, whether it be part left bottles of antibiotics or tablets that may have been distributed to by vets, the needles and syringes, dry cow tubes, warmers, dose, and so anything on the veterinary side is included in that hazardous waste bracket for vet meds.
And again, still looking at the list, it isn't exhausted completely. I'm quite sure there are other ones that we haven't thought up about. But what about persistent organic pollutants? What are they?
Yes, so I suppose there are chemicals that are seen persistent, that will stay in the environment and are life chemicals, I suppose, and they're I suppose the nastier ones. We don't see very much of them, but where they are, we're making a facility there to collect them as part of the collections. And all this information for farmers is connected there to our website, and farmers can go in and see the details of what is available and what can be disposed of on the day.
Farmers, you're asking them to be prepared properly to visit one of the collection points across the country. So what do farmers themselves have to do? I'm looking at 6 things. Can you explain those 6 things that the farmer has to do?
Yeah, Jim, we've had learnings on this from last year, in that there was 3 trial collections carried out in the southeast and Midlands of the country, and 600 farmers attended them collections, with disposing of 95,000 kilograms of hazardous waste. And from them learnings, we learned that it's very important for farmers to have the waste clearly identified and segregated into different groups of waste for transport. On the vet med side, the needles and syringes should be separated and transported in a sealed container for the needles and sharps. The oils shouldn't be mixed. If you're bringing different types of oils, separate the oils. So they're the main things that in the separation. I suppose it's common sense stuff in transporting these sort of waste to the collection. And for the waste then on the day, it'll be required that farmers provide a herd number or equivalent to dispose of the waste. And I suppose what we mean by that, most mainline farmers will have a herd number, but there'll be other people, say in horticulture, veg growing, nurseries, garden centres, pig farmers that mightn't just have a herd number, and it's still open to them as well. So it's open to all farm enterprises right across the spectrum of agriculture and horticulture.
So, and how do they get around the herd number? Those of us who have farmed all our working lives had a herd number. How do the others get around if you don't have a herd number?
Yeah, so I suppose if you don't have a herd number, you may have a professional user number as a pesticide user,
right.
And you may have identity as a veg grower or a nursery or garden centre. So that number can be used in disposal of the waste. So I suppose what we're saying is herd number or equivalent type registration status with the Department of Agriculture.
Right. There is no then opportunity, I gather, unless you're in the business, for somebody else listening to us this morning who might have a collection of these hazardous waste in their outhouse or a shed or whatever the case may be, and they have been growing vegetables themselves for the last 20 years, and these things have been gathering on shelves. No opportunity for them to get rid of the hazardous waste.
Well, there has been there this year as well. There has been some civic amenity and household hazardous waste collections around the country,
right.
And there has been some opportunities for what we call civic amenity householders to dispose of hazardous waste as well. So this is all coming under the one National Hazardous Waste Plan of 2021 to 2027, implemented by the EPA.
So there'd be somebody else other than yourselves in the department joining with the EPA to collect that kind of waste?
Yes, but specifically for these 6 collections, it'll be farm hazardous waste. That's what we're concentrating on.
That's what I mean, yeah. That's what I'm trying to get, because a lot of people listening to us, Declan, this morning will not be necessarily farmers but would have waste. So it's good to know that there are ways that people can bring this hazardous waste. And I do know that some of the collection centres for waste anyway, they take in some of these hazardous wastes as well. So there is places where you can go at any time of the year with waste.
Yeah, there are some avenues can dispose of hazardous waste through civic amenity waste collections, hazardous waste collections. And that's all been, it's all under the one National Hazardous Waste Plan, DPA's National Waste Plan 2021 to 2027. So it's a recommendation from that plan.
Okay. Now, this is a very important collection that's happening. So, there's one happening in County Clare on the 12th of this month. We've
6 of them planned, the South and Midwest, and starting, as I say, in Clare next Wednesday on the 12th of November. And then the 6 are taking place between Clare, Meath, Cork, one in Tipperary and Holy Cross. That one is on the 28th of November, and one in Mayo, and followed lastly by one in Kerry for this year.
Yeah, and the one in Cork isn't too far away from people in Tipperary, so the date for the Cork one is what?
Yeah, the date for the Cork one is the 25th of November, and that's in the Charleville Showgrounds. People will be familiar with that from Charleville Show. And farmers will find further details on the Department of Agriculture website as to locations and the costs involved. And we've started to send out text messages to farmers directly to their phones with a link back to our website, informing farmers of the collections.
Well, look at Declan. I want to thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. That, listeners, was Declan Keely from the Department of Agriculture, talking about the disposal of hazardous waste and giving you the dates for Clare, Tipperary and Cork.
Yes, so just another aspect of it, Jim, that farmers that attend the collections will receive a receipt for the payment of the hazardous waste, and also this will be a record of attending the hazardous waste collection and the disposal of the farm hazardous waste from their farms.
And that will be reflected in their, shall we say, the register of medicines as far as rules under, we'd say, CAP, etc.
Yes, so that would meet the regulatory requirements for the disposal of the waste.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much, Declan, for joining us. That, listeners, was Declan Keely from the Department of Agriculture, telling us all about hazardous waste. And if you, as a farmer, have hazardous waste and you're in Tipperary, Clare or Cork, why not avail of this opportunity to get rid of any hazardous waste that's on your farm? And you will find out more about hazardous waste on the department website. Listeners, before I sign off this morning, there's just one piece of news, I suppose, that I would like to pass on. That last week we lost Eamon Glasheen, who was a great supporter of equine sports in County Tipperary, and unfortunately Eamon passed away last week, and may he rest in peace. That, listeners, is Agri Report for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll join me at the same time next week. Coming up next is the news at 10 o'clock, and after that, Eamon Dwyer presents Down Your Way.